Well, yesterday a student approached me with huge problems with neuroanatomy. So I said that the nervous system is basically meant to respond to a stimulus. A stimulus is the change in your environment, mental, physical, or emotional. It is processed, you find out whether it is painful, neutral, or pleasurable. And using your previous experience of memory systems, you respond to it. You respond to it by seeking the pleasurable and avoiding the painful. And this you continue to do from birth to death. So, this perception of the stimulus is by what is called as the afferent system or the sensory system. And the efferent is the motor system. Now, supporting this system, here always memory and consciousness is involved. So, this is the conscious system. But supporting this, there is a system where there is no consciousness involved, and this is called as the reflex system. So, with the sensory and the motor system, there is a supportive sensory and supportive motor system, and the center of this reflex system is the cerebellum. Today we will try to understand the cerebellum. So we draw a diagram. The corpus callosum, the septum lucidium, the fornix, the two thalamus, the caudate nucleus, lentiform nucleus, the claustrum. This is the internal capsule, this is the external capsule, and then we develop the cortex. Here is the lateral sulcus and the insula, and here is the temporal lobe. Then here is the midbrain connected to the cerebellum by the superior cerebellar peduncle. Then you have the pons connected to the cerebellum by the middle cerebellar peduncle, and finally you will have the medulla connected to the cerebellum by the inferior cerebellar peduncle, and this is the cerebellum, which is the secretary of the cortex. So the secretary must find out what the cortex wants. So this information, what the cortex wants, starts from the cortex passes through the corona radiata. This component is the corona radiata. Passes from the internal capsule, goes right up to the pons, and here it relays, and the second neuron carries it to the cerebellum. So this is the cortico-pontocerebellar tract. Cortico-pontocerebellar tract. Then the information of what is, so this is what conveys the intention of the cortex. So here you have the intention. Then this cortex must receive in visual impulses. So here is the eye. It tells what is the position of the head in relation to the Earth's artificial horizon. So these impulses come into the midbrain, superior colliculus. They relay here, and then through the superior cerebellar peduncle, these impulses pass into this information passes into the cortex. So this is the tectum. Here will be the tectum in the midbrain, and therefore these tracts which bring visual information are called as tectocerebellar. Then from the pons you have the vestibular nucleus here, and the semicircular canals of the ear, which tell the rate of change and the plane of change of the position of the head. So this is the vestibular part of the vestibulocochlear apparatus. The cochlear is the hearing part, the vestibular is that which tells you the change. Through the auditory nerve, the impulse reaches the vestibular nucleus, and through the middle cerebellar peduncle, this information comes. Now let us see how the information comes from the muscles. So the information has to be from the muscles and tone, and the muscle tone basically spreads through the fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis. So from the muscles, the information would pass into the spinal cord, first order. Then it will go through to the medulla level. It will be the fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis of right and left side. Here they will become the nucleus cuneatus and nucleus gracilis. Through the posterior external arcuate fibers, they will go to the cerebellum of the same side. Posterior external arcuate fibers. And then there will be the internal arcuate fibers which will cross. So this internal arcuate fibers have crossed to the opposite side. They will rise as the spinal lemniscus to the thalamus, and from the thalamus to the cortex, because the boss must know everything. And then through the anterior external arcuate fibers, they will go to the cerebellum of the opposite side. So the muscle tone, which muscle, what is the degree of contraction of muscles, would travel through the fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis. But then there is a position of joints and the rate of change in the position. This information will be carried by the spinocerebellar tracts. There will be an anterior spinocerebellar tract which will rise up to the level of the midbrain, cross, and then through the superior cerebellar peduncle, go to the cerebellum of the opposite side. Then there will be the posterior spinocerebellar tract, which will pass through the inferior cerebellar peduncle from the medulla and go to the cerebellum of the same side. Thus, visual, vestibular, muscle sense, muscle position, and joint position. Present position and rate of change is conveyed to the cerebellum, reaches the cerebellum, and by this the cerebellum is able to compute the expected position of the body at some future time, at time t. From this expected position at time t, it subtracts the intended position, and by this subtraction you get what is the correction needed to achieve the intended position. Now, this correction is conveyed by the supportive motor system. Which we also called as the extra-pyramidal system, which will control the involuntary movements. Pyramidal system will control the voluntary movements or conscious movements. The extra-pyramidal system will control the involuntary movements. Okay, so we would quickly place the extrapyramidal system. The base of the extrapyramidal system is called as the stretch reflex. So we'll make the spinal cord here and we'll put the grey matter here. This is the spinal cord, and we'll put the muscle here. The muscle has got two types of fibers. The extrafusal fibers, which connect the origin to insertion. And it has got nucleated intrafusal fibers, which are nucleated, and on the end of these extrafusal fibers, you have these muscle fibers. Now, the extrapyramidal system comes from above to the anterior horn, and through the gamma neuron controls these intrafusal fibers. So this is gamma neuron. So when these intrafusal fibers contract, there is an annulospiral ring here. So when these intrafusal fibers contract, the distance between the coils of this intrafusal ring will increase, and this information would be conveyed to the spinal cord. Through another neuron, it will make the extrafusal fibers contract, so that origin will come nearer the insertion. This insertion will come nearer the origin, and the distance between the coils of the annulospiral ring will be restored. Distance between the coils of annulospiral ring will be restored. So this is called as the stretch reflex. And as there is electrical impulse coming through the system all the time the muscle is in a degree of contraction. But this contraction is isometric contraction, because the length doesn't change, but the muscle is still contracted. So all muscles are in a state of isometric contraction, and this is called as the tone. Tone can increase, tone can decrease. Now let us start relating this tone to each other. Let us say that this is the elbow, and here you have the thumb, and here you have the hand. Now at this elbow, the flexors, the extensors, and the flexors at this position, at this angle, at this angle, flexor and extensor tone is equal. So the position is not changing. But supposing you want this angle to become different. Now your intention of the cortex is that this angle should be this. So at this tone, at this position, the extensor and flexor tone will become equal. So this tone must change so that now it is equal at this position of the joint. At this position of the joint. So this is the system that allows the change. And therefore, these muscles which produce opposite movements are called as antagonists. So, this is the antagonistic reflex. Then you would appreciate that with dorsiflexion of the wrist, there would be MP joint flexion because you are trying to catch something in your grasp. So with dorsiflexor of the wrist, the flexors of the MP joint will contract. So dorsiflexors wrist act in the same phase as MP flexors. This is called as synphasic action. Then the third is that for example, the flexor carpi radialis, the palmaris longus, and the flexor carpi ulnaris, all three would flex at the wrist. Okay, so this is called as synergistic action. All three will contract together. So they are called as synergistic muscles. That is called as synphasic muscles. Now, when you are walking, the flexion of this hand, flexion of the right hand, will extend the left hand. You see, this is automatically reversed. So this is called as, when this hand will flex, this will extend. So this is called as horizontal reflex. Then with upper limb flexing, lower limb of the opposite side lower limb of the opposite side will also flex. So if the hand of the right side is flexed, the left side lower limb will flex. Lower limb will flex. Right upper limb flexion, left lower limb flexion. So you can see this when the person is marching. So this is called as diagonal reflex. So all these are reflexes at lower level, and this is what will be controlled by the higher centers of the extrapyramidal system. So basically, flexor tone is controlled by the spinal cord. The extensor tone is controlled by the vestibular nucleus. So if there is a section above the vestibular nucleus, then the person will go into extensor rigidity, which is called as decerebrate rigidity. Why flexor tone is the lowest tone of the spinal cord? Because the fetus is in complete flexor when it is floating in the uterus. Then everything would now control these flexor and extensor tones. Alright. So then we go on to the level of the red nucleus in the midbrain, the substantia nigra, the reticular formation. they will balance the flexor extensor tone. So they are causing the change in flexor extensor tone. Then these will be controlled by the subthalamic nucleus, which will change this balance in a manner so that you can progress forwards or progress backwards, walk forwards or walk backwards. So this starts the gait. Then the caudate nucleus allows the one side stride, right side stride would lessen and left side stride would increase, opposite side. So this is the left caudate nucleus. It will increase the stride on the left side, shorten the stride on the right side, so that you will start turning towards the right. So caudate nucleus is responsible for turning. And then there is the area 4S in the cortex, which keeps telling the cortex what is happening. So it integrates the extrapyramidal system to the pyramidal system. So that's the area 4S of the cortex. So the cerebellum would put its corrective action through these areas. Area 4S, caudate nucleus, subthalamic nucleus, red nucleus, substantia nigra, reticular formation, vestibular nucleus, and the internuncial neuron systems of spinal cord, all of which will act through the stretch reflex. So in short, how would the cerebellum perceive the intention of cortex? Cortico-pontocerebellar system. How would it perceive the position of body and rate of change and the expected position? By the tectocerebellar, vestibulocerebellar, spinocerebellar, and fasciculus cuneatus, fasciculus gracilis, the posterior column. Then how would it put corrective action? It will put corrective action through connecting with area 4S, the caudate nucleus, the substantia nigra, red nucleus, reticular formation, the vestibular nucleus, and the spinal cord. And controlling through these the reflexes, which is basically the stretch reflex of individual muscles. So this finishes the reflex control of locomotion.